It's time to have your say. Welcome back to the Q&A, answering your questions in the wrestling community. It's time for another episode of Ask SCW. Welcome back to the channel. It's great to have you once again answering your questions in the wrestling community. So much to touch on today, including WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, NXT, and much more. Over 19 different askers this week, so plenty of questions to get through. Let's not waste any time and get in with our first question this week. First question this week then coming from Dylan Ketchum, and he asked, do you think we would see a Seth Rollins face turn and he would face Roman Reigns at SummerSlam? Fantastic question to kick us off this week, and I had a similar thought there. Looking backstage on SmackDown this week, Seth Rollins being unhappy he was cost that match against Cesaro due to the Usos interfering in that match. Seth Rollins saying that Roman needs to take care of his in-house with the Usos, or he'll be back to take care of it himself. And why would WWE subtly drop that hint if Seth isn't going to return to this further down the line? Now, I know what you're saying to me already. Plans change every week from WWE. Of course, this is not a guarantee at this point, and perhaps you would be right. But for me, I'm hopeful, especially more on the SmackDown side than the Raw side, that plans potentially could be a bit more long-term. And SummerSlam does feel like it would be the right destination for this match. And Seth Rollins, for me, he's doing fine with his current gimmick. I've got no problem with it. Of course, I'm embracing the vision. I'm certainly being blinded by those suits each and every week. He does come onto our TV sets to cut a promo. But what I will say to it is that with Seth, I don't think it would necessarily be a bad thing if he was to go back being a babyface, because Seth, he needed to turn heel back in 2019. He's had a lengthy run now, of about a year and a half now, of being that sort of messiah gimmick, that heel. Now he's embracing the vision. Maybe SmackDown, though, is lacking another babyface, that top-end babyface, to challenge Roman long-term for that championship. It does feel like a money match, so I would be quite invested in seeing Seth Rollins go back to being a babyface. The only way I would be against this is if WWE does actually push the button on superstars like Cesaro, like Big E, and perhaps to a lesser extent Kevin Owens, and push them high towards that main event scene once again with Roman Reigns. But for right now, looking at it to give a prediction, I think so. I think it could be on. I think Seth Rollins versus Roman Reigns is a potential likely match we could see at SummerSlam this year, and I do think it's one of the biggest matches that WWE could do, certainly as well, I'd say on the SmackDown side, in the whole of WWE. So part of me really hopes it happens. Dylan Ketchum has a second question, but he's not on his own with this one. Wrestling by Waldridge also has a similar question going on here, and we'll just quickly give a readout for both of them. Dylan saying that since Jimmy Uso is back, are the Usos going to turn face, or is Jimmy turning heel, aligning himself with his brother and his cousin? And Wrestling by Waldridge asking if they will actually revert back to a tag team, the Usos, or if they'll be singles competitors, or both. Both fantastic questions, and the Usos, it really is the million-dollar question this week on SmackDown. Jimmy Uso does seem like he doesn't want to fall in line with everything that was going on. He's not forgotten about what happened at Hell in a Cell. He's not forgotten about how Jey Uso was there trying to protect him during that Cell match, and what has become of Jey since then. And Jimmy doesn't want to fall in line. He doesn't want to acknowledge the tribal chief. And I do think that we're going to play with this dynamic for a little while. I hope anyway that WWE does drag it out for 3 or 4 weeks, because that way we can see the Usos as a tag team going forth, because I really do believe that Jimmy versus Roman Reigns is a potential match we could get at Money in the Bank for the Universal Championship, because no, I don't see Cesaro winning the championship. I actually feel a bit sorry for Cesaro. He did look very strong at the end of SmackDown last week. I like the way they booked that, but by doing this sort of storyline with Jimmy's return now, it does sort of a little bit, in my opinion, overshadow the Roman Reigns and Cesaro match. Kind of gives away that result already and gives us an idea of what we're going to see going forward. But I do think we'll get a bit of both with the Usos. I do think we'll get that sort of tag team partnership. I do think we'll get singles wrestlers as well. I wouldn't be surprised even if we build towards the pay-per-view after Money in the Bank, we get Jimmy versus Jey, and then we get Jimmy versus Roman. That could be a way that goes down, and perhaps Jimmy eventually will also have to fall in line with the Tribal Chief eventually joining the Bloodline, because if he loses like Jey did in that sort of high stakes kind of caliber match, there could be a case where Jey Uso has to fall in line with the Tribal Chief. So I wouldn't sort of go past seeing that. And one thing's for sure, WWE have played that as an absolute masterstroke this week with them three on SmackDown. Everything was done extremely well, really captivating television. I can't wait to see what it's going to bring next week. But as for Jey Uso, I do think it's going to be going against Jey and Roman in the short term, but long term, I can see him being aligned with them once again, and I do see the Usos being tag team champions going into the latter part of 2021. Next question coming from Jackknife Power Blog. I will ask SCW if the Tribal family should add Tamina or add Nia Jax to their ranks. Funny you should mention that question. It's a very good question, by the way, but funny you should mention it because Kevin Owens made a bit of a mention on Talking Smack this week. The idea actually of perhaps Tamina or Naomi actually joining the family at some point further down the line. But Nia Jax has those ties as well. It would be interesting if they want to add a female to the group. I certainly wouldn't be against it. I think it would be an interesting twist. Of course, then they can have their power over the women's division as well. Perhaps the storytelling would be even better in the women's division if they were to have Roman Reigns' stable having a female member or two female members of the group. If they have two, they can go for those tag team championships. I always was a fan actually back in the day of Nia Jax and Tamina being the team that were together that originally went for the women's tag team championships when they were first created. But of course they broke that team up because I think Nia got injured at the time, and of course they went to different paths after that, and of course being on different shows. But I wouldn't be surprised if it was to happen. I'd like to see at least one female added to the group at some point further down the line, but I like seeing it all being done gradually. So what's going on with Jey Uso right now, let that play out and let's see what happens further down the line. But it would be interesting maybe if Naomi could be brought into this, would be quite fun. But she's on Raw, so along with her and Nia Jax, when she loses those tag team championships eventually also would be tagged to Raw. So I think Tamina at this point probably would be the most likely if one of them was to join the family. Wrestling through life of our next question now here on Ask SCW. What are my thoughts on potentially SummerSlam moving to July to begin the touring of WWE again? Love this question, and I love this idea as well. Have seen it in the rumour mill this past weekend. The suggestion of SummerSlam being earlier this year, and of course if WWE were in a position where they can bring fans back earlier, due to the pandemic, things getting better in the world, then why not start off with one of your biggest pay-per-views possible? It's one of the big four. It's one of arguably the biggest pay-per-views that WWE can offer, shows on the calendar. So yeah, I think it would be a great placement to do so. WWE, they can do what they want with their pay-per-views, can put them any which way. I personally wouldn't be offended. I know usually it's always traditionally been an August pay-per-view, but for these circumstances this year, why not? Let's have SummerSlam as the big one, kicking off in that stadium environment again. I'd love it on the beach. Probably not going to happen, but stadium environment, and then WWE can start off their touring once again. I think personally it would be awesome, and it would make SummerSlam feel even more special this year than it already does. Michael, the next question now. What is your favourite WWE faction / stable of all time? Evolution, I think, will have to be my favourite. I like what they represented. I like what they stood for. You had the now of Triple H. You had the mentor, the legend of Ric Flair. Someone that would look over Triple H, but also with them together, looking over the future of Randy Orton and Batista, and of course all of them going on to big things in WWE, and of course the breakups as well, the way they were done, iconic moments, of course the way Randy was kicked out of the group, the way that Batista turned on Triple H as well. So yeah, I mean them as a tandem, but also the way they separated and what it actually represented and what they became, really for me makes Evolution stand out as a faction and my favourite of all time. I did grow up loving D-Generation X, of course, and NWO as well, arguably yes, a WCW stable, but they did have a brief spell as well in WWE, more for their WCW days, but those two would be close runner-ups, but for me I think Evolution takes the victory. FAF Wrestling, a great channel by the way on YouTube, go and check them out with the next question now. Thoughts on Matt Hardy wanting to end his career with his brother, what tag team would you have them face in that match? Great question, this one, and I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen, by the way. I know Jeff Hardy, at the moment, I think he's meant to be negotiating a WWE contract, and, well, I mean, he's not really on TV much at the moment anyway. I wouldn't be surprised to see Jeff Hardy leave. I wouldn't be surprised to see him join his brother in All Elite Wrestling at some point down the line. And if they were to finish as a tag team, who should they go up against to finish off? For me, I know we've seen it in Ring of Honor, but I would go with the Young Bucks all day long. You can really paint a really good story with these two two teams together, and the fact we haven't seen it in AEW, I think the way it can be presented to a more, if you want, a more mainstream audience than what we had with Ring of Honor back in 2017, I think this could be very beautifully done in AEW. So for me, that would be the way I would go. I'd go Matt and Jeff Hardy with their final match and final feud against the Young Bucks. That for me, I think has money printed all over it. And if you really wanted to, you could even go with a classic ladder match. BCC WrestlePod over the next question now. Now that the Pinnacle has seemingly finished their feud with the Inner Circle, where do you see the group going from here? Interesting question, because of course, yes, the Pinnacle did win the Blood and Guts match this past week, and of course, it looks like perhaps Jericho, I mentioned for the short term, would definitely probably be written off TV, of course, taking that big fall from the top of the Blood and Guts cage area, that sort of War Games structure, if you will. Yeah, I don't think the feud is over at this point. I think that it's just getting started. I think the way that match finished, with them actually getting the victory, yes, it would have closed there, but the fact they took it one step further with MJF there with Jericho afterwards, I think this is going to continue on. I wouldn't be surprised to see MJF against Sammy Guevara going into Double or Nothing, and perhaps we could even get the tag teams going against each other as well with FTR and Proud and Powerful. But to look a bit further ahead then of where they could go after they finish winning the circle, I think it depends if the next time round the Pinnacle actually come out on top, because I'm sure MJF will want to go for the AEW Championship, and now that he has a stable watching his back, that was probably the goal all along. So I think MJF eventually will be going back into the World Championship picture. It's just a matter of when rather than if, in my personal opinion. Next question comes from Irish McNeil. With Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks and Darby Allin all looking fairly untouchable, who do you see each of them losing the belts to, and do you think it will be this year? Fantastic question, this one, and of course that is a money question for you right there, because all of them are looking untouchable and have all had lengthy championship reigns. Looking at the Young Bucks, I think they are destined to take on Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston at Double or Nothing, and if there is a team right now that could beat the Young Bucks, I think that could be the team that could do it, but I would have to see what would happen long term. The only thing I could say that could go and support that argument is then Moxley and Kingston could also take on the Good Brothers, with them all trying to win their AEW Tag Team Championship. So for me, that could work as a fun little dynamic. Kenny Omega is a very difficult one. I don't see him losing the championship for a long time to come. I still think the right person to beat him eventually is Hangman Page, but I still think we're about at least 6 months away, maybe even 9 months away from that. We could be looking Full Gear, perhaps even Revolution next year. That's how far ahead I think Kenny Omega should keep the championship. But I would also potentially argue that AEW, if they wanted to look even stronger, because Kenny Omega is the belt collector, that if he's going to lose those championships eventually, arguably shouldn't the belt, if for your company, he should lose first. That way it looks like that your roster was the one that was able to beat him before someone from a different roster was able to take that championship from Kenny Omega. So there is different twists and dynamics the way this can be done. So for that argument as well, there is a chance that perhaps Kenny could lose the AEW World Championship this year. But I still think that right now Hangman Page would be my potential personal choice if I was to get my way anyway. But looking at things with Darby Allin, that ties in very nicely with our next question. And that comes from Wrestling Network. With Darby versus Miro set for next week, or this Wednesday, by the time now I'm answering this, Wrestling Network sees Miro winning the TNT Championship. Who do you think will challenge Miro at Double or Nothing? Great question, and to tie in with the last question, I also think that Miro is winning the championship this Wednesday, so I think Darby's time is coming to an end. I think Darby and Sting will take on Scorpio Sky and Ethan Page at Double or Nothing, which frees up Miro's schedule to actually defend the TNT Championship. And whom should he defend it against? Well, in my personal opinion, the storyline would make sense for Kip Sabian. I mean, that would be the one that would come in and try and get a championship opportunity. But from what I'm aware of, he's actually generally on the injured list. I think he's actually been written off TV for a reason. So I think Kip is not coming back for a little while. So who could he face in the meantime? I think Jungle Boy would perhaps be a good shout. Someone of that sort of level I think would be quite fun to see going against Miro. Either way though, I think if Miro does win the TNT Championship, I do think we see a dominant reign coming ahead for the best man. Well, we talked about Kenny Omega losing the AEW World Championship. Let's actually twist it with our next question now, coming from Jonesy Chats Wrestling. Who do I believe should beat Kenny Omega for the Impact World title? And also, who do you see Impact signing from the WWE releases? Thanks in advance. Well, no, thank you for your questions first off. And looking at it, I mean, personally for me, I would hope that it would be someone coming outside in from one of those releases. Samoa Joe would be my personal preference and choice to do so. I currently don't see anyone on the Impact roster defeating Kenny Omega. The only one I could see potentially that would have a slimmer of a chance right now would be W. Morrissey, because I think he is going to be a big deal in Impact Wrestling. My only thing against that, I don't see the heel versus heel dynamic. So if I was to get my way, Samoa Joe would return home to Impact, and he would be the one to defeat Kenny Omega for the Impact Championship, and I think that would take place at Bound for Glory this year. As for the WWE releases then, Samoa Joe is one. I can see the Iconics happening, because I think for those Knockouts Tag Team Championships, that would make a lot of sense. I think Laurel Van Ness, of course, aka Chelsea Green, will return to Impact Wrestling. Of course, she's with Matt Cardona, so it makes a lot of sense for her to go there. Of course, she's also good friends with Deonna Purrazzo, and Deonna Purrazzo, of course, is in a relationship with Steve Cutler, so I can see Cutler and Wesley Blake going over to form a tag team in Impact Wrestling. Perhaps won't be so forgotten under the Impact banner. So those will be my predictions of who I think right now from the WWE releases will be going to Impact Wrestling. But who do you feel? Let me know in the comments below right now. WrestleRant 13 for our next question now. What are your thoughts on Jordynne Grace re-signing with Impact Wrestling? I'm a big fan of Jordynne Grace, have been for a very long time. I think she could apply her trade in any wrestling company and would be a success. But I'm a big Impact fan, and I'm really pleased to see that she's re-signed with the company. I think it's massive for Impact Wrestling. They lost a lot of knockouts in the recent sort of months, going to other promotions. Frankie Monet, of course, Taya Valkyrie being one of them, going to WWE, of course, part of the NXT banner. And I don't want to see people continually leave Impact Wrestling. So for me, I'm really happy to see that Jordynne is sticking around. She's got a great tag team going on right now as Knockouts Tag Team Champions with Rachel Ellering. I'm really looking forward to seeing how that program goes and develops. Perhaps at some point they probably will have a breakup angle, and Jordynne will probably be a single star once again. And I do see at some point becoming Knockouts champion once again during with this new re-sign with the company. So for me, overall, I'm very happy about it. Ticks a lot of the boxes. It's good to see that Jordynne Grace is remaining a part of the Impact roster. Next question is now coming from Lorenzo Carrillo, asking for us now. Now that Moose has confirmed that his contract is up in June, could he win the Impact title before he leaves, or will he re-sign or go to a different company? And the second question is, when do we see Aleister Black and Mia Yim being back in the ring on SmackDown? Potentially Money in the Bank season? Two fantastic questions for us there, and I spoke about in the last question how I was so happy that Jordynne Grace had re-signed for Impact. A lot of people seem to be leaving Impact, going to other places, whether it's NXT, AEW. Sadly with Moose, I think he's the next one that's going to go out the door. If I had to predict right now, Moose has been with the company for 5 years, and he's in fantastic condition. He seems to be actually in the best condition of those 5 years now. Some of the matches he's having are unbelievable. I'm going to give a spoiler alert, actually. I think he's winning the 6-man match Under Siege, that 6-pack challenge. I think him versus Kenny Omega will go down against all odds, and I wouldn't be surprised if Moose has to put his career on the line for Impact, and then perhaps loses and Kenny Omega gets him out of the door. I think Moose probably has been used to working earlier in the week. The change to Thursdays perhaps is not for him. I can see him potentially going to AEW personally, another bigger guy that could be in and amongst their roster. And of course, don't forget, Moose was a part of All In, was a part of the Battle Royal they had on the buy-in back then. So I wouldn't be surprised if they were to sign him. I think WWE were rumored to be interested in him in around the time that he went to Impact Wrestling. So there is a chance perhaps even NXT could acquire the services of Moose as well. But for me, I just feel with Moose, he should have been a world champion by now in Impact Wrestling. They never pulled the trigger. Every time he got there so far up the card, something has happened to take that momentum away. So I feel sorry for Moose when you look at how things have turned out. I would love him to stay there until he became world champion. Perhaps he would be someone I would have said in a couple of questions ago that would be a worthy person to beat Kenny Omega for that championship at some point down the line. But I think that it's going to happen Under Siege, that he wins. I think he gets the shot against all odds. And sadly, if I had to guess right now, I think that's it. I think he goes out the door onto a different company. As for Aleister Black and Mia Yim, hopefully Money in the Bank season will be good. One thing that's worrying with Aleister Black, and no one I've seen this mentioned anywhere, Aleister Black has been doing these stories the last couple of weeks on SmackDown. Until this week, it wasn't on there at all. There wasn't even time on a throwback edition of SmackDown, even 30 seconds, to get the next chapter of Aleister Black's story. I really hope that WWE are not giving up on this sort of return already. maybe I'm panicking, maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but the fact is that it's such a short thing. You're throwing your television program that you could have put in for 30 seconds, made one match slightly a move or two shorter. For me, that says something. I just feel for me that Aleister Black deserves to be on SmackDown, deserves to do well on SmackDown. I really want to see this gimmick work out and pay off and see Aleister Black towards the top end of the SmackDown roster. But we'll have to wait and see what will happen. Hopefully it will return this week as it was, because last week was just that throwback edition. We go back to normality this week and we have that in there. And perhaps with Mia Yim, yeah, Money in the Bank would be fantastic. A great way to bring her in as well, because we're going to need some people in that Money in the Bank ladder match, and it'll be an interesting to see who is going to go in for the women's side this year. So fingers crossed it does happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if we're saying in ring that Aleister Black is still a few weeks away. Mia Yim, the fact that she's been traded over to SmackDown well over a month ago and we've not heard anything yet, I wouldn't be surprised again if it's a little bit longer, because Bianca Belair and Bayley, I imagine that's a Backlash, and perhaps afterwards we could see the return of Sasha Banks. So let's see how it's going to go down. It's going to be interesting. That's one thing we can say definitely for sure. Next question now comes from Bonafide Heat here on AskSCW. Would you want to see any mainstream athlete or celebrity have a match in WWE? Great question, this one. Had to get my thinking cap on of who I would select if I was to pick one. I think Conor McGregor would be my choice, just purely because the guy is an athlete, he is a machine. I think he would do quite well being transitioning into a WWE ring. Of course, he has the history of, you know, saying stuff on Twitter as well, so that heat would naturally bring a nice storyline together alone. And I mean, he's great on the stick. I mean, the way he brings people in, casual viewers would come in to check out what Conor McGregor is doing, and I think promo-wise, it would be absolutely fantastic. Of course, he'd have to watch his language a little bit. He couldn't drop F-bombs everywhere, but certainly, I think if Conor McGregor was to come in and he was to talk, I think people would listen, and I think they'd want to see him in a match. And I do think as well, being an athlete, it wouldn't harm whichever member of the WWE roster was to come in and face him, because let's face it, you know, celebrities, they don't really, I don't even remember at this point of top end a celebrity losing a match in WWE. So for me personally, I think Conor McGregor would be a great shout if one was to come in. Anthony New with the next question now. When Bobby Fish returns, do you see him being a singles competitor or teaming back up with Kyle O'Reilly? Fantastic question, this one. I really like this question. My answer is going to purely go on the basis of Kyle O'Reilly. I think we're going to get a single start out of Bobby Fish purely because Kyle O'Reilly has gone to another level. He's no longer a tag team wrestler in NXT. Arguably, he is the next challenger right now for Karrion Kross for the NXT World Championship. And, you know, defeating Adam Cole as well, I can see a dynamic going there that Bobby Fish, he's not been around while the UE's completely imploded. So he possibly could be someone that say, well, come on, I'm back. Let's get the band back together, try and see if you can talk some sense into people. Maybe you can get in Adam Cole's ear. Maybe you can be a sidekick to what Adam Cole is doing once again. Maybe Fish and Roderick Strong could be a talent that could work together, and that goes nicely into the next question, which comes from Austin Whitley asking, what do I think is next for Roderick Strong? Well, I think Roderick can't deal with not being a part of the UE. You see the way how he quit NXT, the fact as well of Cameron Grimes also sort of rubbing in about the breakup. He's not really coped so well on his own. So Adam Cole, he said that it was holding him back, but the fact is he couldn't beat Kyle O'Reilly when it comes to NXT TakeOver. Maybe a little bit of time goes further down the line, them two have a rematch, and Roderick Strong, Bobby Fish both come back and support Adam Cole to get his victory back. I think that would possibly make the most sense, because just going on Roderick Strong alone, I can't see him going to Raw or SmackDown. I think he would be lost in the shuffle, and that's really awful to say because I think Roderick Strong is a fantastic wrestler, one of my underrated personal bests. I think he is a very underrated talent and not enough appreciation in my opinion for how good he really is. NXT UK, I don't see that happening either, so I think he comes back and I think either tries to right the wrong and be a top babyface like Kyle O'Reilly, or he goes back to Adam Cole, and I think going back to Adam Cole makes most sense. Whether Adam Cole uses Fish and Strong for the short term to get his win back over Kyle O'Reilly, or it becomes a long-term thing, we'll have to wait and see. But I do think in the long term, I do see the Fatal 4-Way. I think that goes down. So for Fish, I think he will be against Kyle O'Reilly as a singles competitor, and I think Roderick Strong also will be costing Kyle O'Reilly his match in a rematch with Adam Cole. Next question coming from Mike, Atan Habs Mike, and he says, what did you think of the Karrion Kross segment on NXT as it sets up numerous angles all around? And also asking, what were my thoughts of the Randy Savage bio last week on A&E? That he thought they did Savage wrong and they focused on more of the bad and not the good. And now I must admit, I'm going to start off with the Randy Savage stuff. I must admit, I haven't seen it. I haven't had the opportunity to, unfortunately. Just life has got in the way. I've just not had the opportunity to sit down and watch the show. I do hope to go and check it out at some point. What I would say is, if there has been more focus on the bad than the good, then I hope they've got facts to really back up the evidence with it. Because yes, we know Savage was protected, but I mean, unless they have actual hard facts there, the guy can't defend himself. He's not with us anymore. So for me, I would have preferred to hear them do something where it's more focused on the good than the bad. What I would say, if you are going to focus on the dark side, then Dark Side of the Ring did a fantastic job of this with Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth. Actually, I think it was one of their first episodes from season 1, so I'd say go and check that out, because I think that was done a lot more tastefully, in my personal opinion. But I haven't seen the bio yet, so I do hope to go and check out at some stage. Now, as for Karrion Kross, now I did say earlier on in the video that I did believe that Kyle O'Reilly is sort of being groomed as the next real challenger. We could get the Fatal 4-Way, actually thinking about it, because Finn Balor and Pete Dunne were there as well, and there's lots of different angles and directions this could go off as well. So I'm interested to see where it's going to go. Could we get like a triple threat #1 contenders match? Either way, there's a lot of things that can happen. It was slightly a messy segment, but certainly I would say that a lot of good can come out of it. And of course, it's exciting to see that these are the top 4 guys right now in NXT around that championship picture, because Pete Dunne is absolutely fantastic, one of my favourite wrestlers. Love to see him in this position. Finn Balor, naturally, of course, he will want to go and try and win the NXT Championship back. What else is there for Finn to do if he's not doing that in NXT? He does feel like the main event there still at the moment, in my personal opinion. And Kyle O'Reilly, he's being groomed as the guy, as the next one. I personally hope they don't rush the one-on-one match. If I was given the option, I think he'd be the one that should beat Karrion Kross for that championship, but I think it should happen further down the line. So I suppose if I had the option, I would go the Fatal 4-Way, have it break off then, have Kyle O'Reilly try and get his win back over Finn Balor, because then that could really groom him into that position. Then go towards finishing off what's going on with Adam Cole, and then go to Karrion Kross and win the championship. But for me, if I'm giving honest answer to what I think will happen, rather than booking it myself, I think we will probably get Kyle O'Reilly against Karrion Kross, or we'll get the Fatal 4-Way. Noob and Co with a couple of questions for us next now. Who is Alexa and Lily's first targets, and whose favourite colour is red, excluding Asuka? I think there's a hint there. And will Johnny Gargano drop the North American title and go back to the NXT Championship picture? Well, that's something you can't ignore as well, because Johnny Gargano and Austin Theory were a part of that segment where we just talked about in the last question. And of course, Johnny Gargano and Austin Theory were standing tall. Now, of course, that was to build up for Cross versus Theory that's happening this week on NXT, and I don't think it's any strange to anyone. I think Austin Theory is getting annihilated by Karrion Kross, and hopefully in a very entertaining fashion. Austin Theory has been fantastic in his current role as part of the Way. But Johnny Gargano, very key point you make there, because Gargano, for me, he is bigger than the North American Championship. I think it probably would be time for him to drop that championship and let, that sort of, if you want that mid-card area of the roster, really thrive holding that championship and having those sort of classic matches between them. Someone could really make a name off beating Johnny Gargano, so that would be a great step to do that at this point. So I'd like to see Johnny Gargano drop that championship in his next title defense against potentially Bronson Reed. I think that's the next one he's got. If not, I mean, there's people like LA Knight, Swerve Scott. I mean, Santos Escobar would be good around that sort of area as well. So there's lots of different people that could hold the championship. Let's see what direction they go, because I think Johnny Gargano, yeah, I would like to see him back in that championship picture, but we'll have to wait and see how it booked and where it will go. As for Alexa Bliss and Lily, well, hopefully we'll find out that first target tonight on Raw. Let's hope it's not another one of these, these backstage promo things in Alexa's playground, because I've personally found them a bit repetitive. But I mean, Sonya Deville was wearing red last week, wasn't she, on Raw? And of course, Lily was in the background at one point, one of the segments there. So that could be a potential of where it could go down. I hope it's someone else. I just don't see Alexa Bliss and the Authority thing working out. I kind of want to see Bliss going for someone, perhaps going for the Raw Women's Championship, perhaps in some format. But I think perhaps we need to build towards that. I don't really have a good answer for you of who I think it should be. I usually save my Nikki Cross shout for each and every week, but I don't think it's the right one at this point, because Nikki Cross, she's not been on TV, so it should be someone that's on TV. Maybe Ravishing Red, maybe someone like that. Maybe Lana should be the target there. Maybe you're just going to build Alexa Bliss up at this point. She's going to work her way through the women's roster. So there we go. There's a real outside of the box name, because Lana isn't involved at the moment on anything that's been pre-announced for Raw right now. So maybe Lana and Naomi could be in a tag team match at some point on the show. Maybe Bliss targets them. Maybe there you go. That's going to be my answer for you as we go for Raw as a quick prediction. Last question this week, and certainly not least, is coming from Mr. DWE, asking, do you think boxing should take a more boxing style approach to shows? For example, have the ring ropes and turnbuckle like boxing rings do, and instead have pay-per-view names like the main event, not some gimmick names. DWE would love to see this approach to wrestling if a company did it, and would have weight classes, not too many, but middleweight, heavyweight, cruiserweight, light heavyweight. So if Bryan was versus heavyweight, it would seem like a big deal. I do like the ideas that you presented there, mainly about the weight classes, because in WWE we used to sort of get that more back in the old days. You wouldn't see, the smaller guys necessarily being, thrown into the main event picture. It was division based. Daniel Bryan at best would be going for the, Intercontinental Championship, maybe the United States Championship, or he would perhaps go for the Cruiserweight division, probably back in the day. But of course, saying that, it would be interesting how it would be put together. But to go with the actual design and look with things like that as boxing does, wrestling for me doesn't need to do that approach. Boxing is boxing and wrestling is wrestling. I like the way that the rings are presented. If you want to do something as a one-off, as something like that, just to give something a bit special, fair enough, that could be kind of fun to see. But I don't think wrestling needs to take an approach from boxing, in my personal opinion. Wrestling's been going for a long time, has been having some very high successful periods, some not as successful, but wrestling, it always finds its way to get back into the mainstream at some point, and I do have the belief that wrestling will get there again one day. Perhaps not to the same heights as maybe some of the places we've been before, but it just needs the right talent pool, the right people to do so. Perhaps doesn't need to take the approaches like boxing. We do already have main event as of course that weekly show, but I know what you're saying with those gimmick pay-per-views we have. Personally for me, I'm not a fan of having all those gimmick pay-per-views. I would prefer to have sort of, if you want more names like we had, again, not to sound like the dinosaur that perhaps I can be, but like you're suggesting, not gimmick ones, some that we had in the past, or new, fresh names that feel something big, something special, something to pull people in. I'm not against having fresh pay-per-view names. So it's an interesting concept. It's certainly an interesting idea that you've presented. I really do like it, but for me, I'd keep wrestling and boxing separate. But I do like the idea of the weight classes being made into where things are more of a bigger deal when sort of smaller wrestlers do get the opportunity to go up a weight class. But that's all from me anyway. Thank you for watching. As always, it's always great for you guys getting your questions in. Make sure to support everybody as well on Twitter. Go and give everybody a follow. And it's your first time watching here, then please do like the video, share the video as well, subscribe if you haven't already, turn the notification bell on as well so you know each and every time a video is released here on SCW. And of course, drop a comment as well. I look forward to interacting with you, talking about any of the topics we've had on today's video. And of course, if you want to drop in a question for the next video, just put a question here in the comments section here on YouTube, or you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Make sure that your question actually features the hashtag AskSCW, and you'll be featured in the next video with a shout out as well, I may add. But that's all from me. Thank you for watching. WrestleMania Backlash predictions will be dropping on the channel tomorrow. SCW Live will be coming this week as well. Looking to do that on Wednesday if possible, so keep an eye on the channel for that. And as well, we'll be doing SCW Rewind. Will be returning to the channel as well. Going to be reviewing Backlash 2016. We'll be live as well doing so look forward to you hopefully joining the live stream and interacting with your comments and memories from Backlash 2016. Of course, quite a fairly modern pay-per-view, believe it or not, 5 years ago now. I look forward to discussing it, of course, some of the talent pool that's there, and also almost seeing how they've developed since as well. Will be quite an interesting discussion. We'll be joined by Rated R for Wrestling, and as well as that non-stop wrestling chat as well. Two fantastic YouTubers that will be joining here on SCW, so make sure to go check those channels out as well. But that's all from me. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. You've been watching SCW here on YouTube.